Welcome, everybody, to another Mentor Time. This one I know has a lot of interest from a lot of people. And I will remind you that we talked a little bit about this topic when we talked about the last early July work from the changing nature of work. And we'll be talking about that again in September. Reminder for those who don't want to be on camera, please turn it off. Today's topic is AI and where is it changing your work? Here's what I want to go over. The first thing we're going to talk about is what we know so far. And this is actually the longest section today because in the last week, I've been collecting articles, as I do also for the changing nature of work and other topics. I keep collecting articles all along. And I had 4 or 5 already for AI. And in the last week, a variety of things. You'll see I've chosen the best ones to talk to you about and some interesting research that we should know about. Then we're going to talk about the effects that we're seeing in terms of AI and where it might be affecting us or we're using it directly. And as always, we end with what should you do? And I'll give you the bottom line up front. It's still going to be a long uphill climb for all of us to figure this out because we're in the early technology days. And someone actually said that in one of the articles that I read. So let's get started with what we know so far. And I deliberately chose the background with ChatGPT because that's moved us to this active discussion. But I want to remind us all, AI has been here. We all know this. We've known it even before ChatGPT came on the scene, I think, October last year, with all of these kinds of things, mapping, search, even menus in restaurants. There's a variety of ways we've been having an interface with AI. So it's nothing new, depending on how you define AI. What is new is the leap in technology. I want to look at a couple things that have been in the news that are important. This is an article the Washington Post had on how AI is being used in healthcare. They had a particular framing that they wanted to focus on. What I'm wanting to show you is that in this first screen and the picture of the red scores there, they used an AI tool on patient care vital signs to signal that the patient was not doing well. And then the doctor circled the bed and discovered a kinked chest tube and fixed it. I will tell you that because you won't see the whole article where it says he or she fixed it. But I also wanted to say it should be something that both you and the nurse and anybody else who goes to the bedside should be looking at, not just how hard the man was gripping. But that's because I'm a nurse. All right, so they've used AI there. I thought the screenshot is really important because you can see that what they're now seeing in their command center overlooking the ICU is a list of patients and how their scores are red or not red or however they're color coding them. They're using these numbers. That same article then talked about how mammograms being read by AI have a better detection of breast cancer, an increase of 20%. Just think about it and then keep that in your brain because that will come up. This technology use will come up again when we talk through today. And finally, the University of Kansas system in this article, they had surveyed hospital systems, is using what they're calling MedPalm 2, which again, this is no surprise because when we talked about AI in the changing nature of work a couple months ago, we talked about the fact that what it's going to be most useful for is summarizing, organizing, giving some suggestions, ideas, brainstorming, etc. So these are interesting concepts and use cases, but not necessarily everything. The second area I wanted to make sure we brought up was the cheating and plagiarism. Early on in November or December, we were seeing a lot of articles about how colleges and high schools especially were worried about plagiarism, which this company Turnitin had developed very quickly, as well as ChatGPT put its own filter together to detect, in this case, Turnitin, as of whenever they interviewed them, had run through 70 million assignments were run through on their free, I assume still free tool. What's important about this, which we know, all of us who are aware of statistics, is even a small error rate where they're saying someone plagiarized and the person didn't, means a lot of students that potentially could be harmed. Think about this when this becomes now larger. Luckily, we're now far enough of the curve of the excitement, of the hype cycle excitement of ChatGPT. Now we've gotten into, oh, we know it. I don't know why they call it hallucinating, because it's not hallucinating. They're just basically ChatGPT makes up facts and presents them. We know about the lawyer who pled a case in front of a judge with false information from ChatGPT because there weren't real cases that they were depending on. So it's going to filter into the workplace as well, in terms of everything from fake transcripts, which has not been something new. It's just in the old days was probably done with whiteout and some kind of Xeroxing, to more use of technologies in jobs where repetitive actions or creative kinds of work is in a way used ChatGPT to do it, and it may not be doing it correctly, accurately. We know that right now there needs to be human intervention. But I liked his lesson. The clear lesson is you can fight it, and make sure you bookmark this article because you may need to come back to it. I didn't give you the long list there if anybody needs it, but you'll get all these. By the way, I've already pasted the links in the email to go out with the recording so that you too can launch each of these links and look at the very interesting articles and research. Then I looked at an article that is on AI entering the workplace. And it was interesting to me that this survey said, oh, there's still AI adoption remains low. Now, you saw the first screen. We've already been using it in a lot of what we're doing. So I don't know why there's this mismatch. And this isn't the only place that they talk about low AI in workplaces. They also felt it important to give us a definition that AI is the use of computing. Basically, they're talking about tasks that can be done by people, but are better done by computers. We've had that for years, decades, more than decades. I was thrilled to finally get a word processor, and before that, a self-correcting typewriter. Those were two big things that helped me, for example. But it is not just that, it is the way in which the now natural language processing, large language models are making it easier for AI to be used, not just for rote tasks, things with standardized processes or standardized outputs, but areas where they say they're hoping to have more efficiency for employees and employees to have more time off. I'm not sure that's going to happen. So further down, they talked about this Energage study of employees. Basically, the message here is 1 in 6 and 1 in 9. There's very little fear about an impact on the work or replacing them in the work by employees that were part of these 15,000. They keep saying few organizations are using these for HR. And apparently that's because HR, many companies have invested huge amounts of money in systems that are probably using HR, like applicant tracking systems that use some of this parsing, but also some decision-making and scoring that go beyond an algorithm that says add up 4 variables and give me a mean score. And so it may be that there are pockets where AI is much more predominant in a company, for example. They talked about common obstacles. My comment here is change management is hard no matter what it is. And with AI, it's going to be even harder because it requires investment and change management. Here was another article, and my summary on this is from someone who wrote an article about it, is that he claims there was an expectation that AI is going to cause huge firings and people aren't going to be able to get back to work. And we know from the last changing nature of work presentation, we still are at a very low unemployment rate in the US. Most of what I'm talking about today is US focused right now. But it's still in its infancy is my translation here. There's still a lot of improvement to get to where it can really help facilitate and isn't just a guide, a summarizing, an idea generating technology. The World Economic Forum put out a survey, or actually whatever CFM-CEPR survey, a European group put together a survey and looked at the impact of what's going to happen to economic growth. And they're predicting a rosy future going way beyond 4%. They're talking about 4 to 6% in high income countries for global growth. I think that's rosy because the supply chain for things coming out of China are greatly getting fragmented. I don't know a lot about this, but I try to bring you all what I know is happening with things in countries, and China's a huge country where the impact of our reliance on them for part of the supply chain means global growth will be affected. Can AI help with some of that? Yes, probably it can. The other area that I don't see addressed in the report, and I read an article, I did not read the whole report, is how and in what way are we going to be able to assist lower income countries and those with very high unemployment rates, which have been problematic for decades. What this continued to talk about was some research from 2018 where they identified these 3 different effects of AI. They're talking basically about a disruptive technology, and they talk about a displacement effect, productivity effect, and a reinstatement effect. So you can imagine displacement, firing, okay, but productivity, the productivity will be there, it'll be changing. And in changing it, there'll be a reinstatement effect, which my short version of that is you'll find a different way to do the same kind of work you've been doing, or you will change the way you've decided to work, either with new skills or a pivot. And finally, they close by saying, from a survey or a conclusion in 2020, 5 years later, now 2025 is less than 2.5 years away, they think we're going to be in a net positive global job positions in 2.5 years. That would be great. Again, I hope they're more equally distributed than they have been in the past, but it looks like that might be possible with AI, and that would be great. And I have a few slides in this one, but the Pew Research is the last of this section. This report just came out a few days ago, and it's great because it helps us better understand some of what we've been talking about and seeing it more in terms of what the employers are doing. In what they've surveyed, and at the very end, I put a screen with the survey methodology and data collection there so that anybody who's watching this in the replay can stop and read it if you want, or go to the report. Women more than men, Asians most of all out of ethnic groups, and bachelor's degree more, which surprised me, more than lower level educational achievement are the are the positions that are most affected right now, or what they're calling most exposed to AI in their jobs. In the past, we've heard about AI and the way in which it's taking over labor jobs that are customer service, for example, things where there's an interface with the public, but it's done on the phone or electronically. And it may be the difference between that and service workers, where we're seeing the kinds of statistics they've given us in the demographics here. These are their findings, 2 that I wanted to highlight. The first one, all the percent seem to be pointing at about 1/5 of the population right now. that are, in this case, most exposed to AI, but it's about 1/5 that 20%, I think, is what the percent of companies that are adopting AI, again, whatever that means. And at the bottom, then I highlighted that those with a high exposure seem to be those who have a college education with higher paying fields. Haven't quite understood where that is, unless we're talking about the huge numbers of IT and researchers, where maybe then the Asian ethnic group comes in. But I don't know. There were no crosstabs that I looked at that I could determine that. But at least it's interesting to think about what that is. And I just want to show this as the last technical slide. This is how they give you illustratively to show in 3 areas: high exposure, medium exposure, and low exposure, the exposure that these jobs have to AI. Most of the jobs in high exposure are going to be high touch jobs, or those jobs where you're doing things repetitively. Accountants, where they deal with numbers, they have to do reports, the same report every quarter, every month, every week, whatever. People who do data entry, technical writing, web developers, a lot of that is standardized procedures. That's where the efficiencies I mentioned earlier will come up. In the medium, this is the definitely high touch and not repeatable processes that have more of a human intervention when you implement the work, because we know that many people who do data entry are fine sitting in their offices all day long and keying in data. Not fine, but that's where their work happens. Interior designers have to go to an interior and look at it to design it generally, or at least a model of it. So think about the kind of job it is, and this will resonate for those who've been to more than one of the changing nature of work, where we have had bar graphs showing the areas where remote work takes place. And those with high exposure are more likely to be able to work from home because of standardization and efficiencies and checklists than those, for example, in medium and low exposure. So it also has implications for that. And I haven't found any research on that yet. This is the Pew study, and this is what they did and how they categorized it and who they classified. So for anybody who wants to dig into statistics, I'm sure that there's some data online too. So what effects are we seeing? This GIF is just to remind you that there's a lot of processes already there that use some version of artificial intelligence in what they're doing and how they're doing it. So when I see this list, and this is what they call in AI uses in business, I'm thinking to myself, how is it that only 20% of employers say that they're considering adopting AI when there are already many of these companies are using these in, if not totally across the organization, in certain departments that they're in? Because every system that people are buying, companies are buying from other companies, like think about customer relationship management, or as I said, applicant tracking systems. The people who are selling those systems are also looking at and adding AI to it. Grammarly, the grammar checker that I use in my browser and on my computer, they've already said that they've put AI into this, even more than they already have. So I am wondering how people are defining AI and whether they're now differentiating it from what ChatGPT and others can bring us. Which leads me to things we are seeing. Image generation. This is DALL-E, and I wanted to show you this. This is the image generator that came out of the same org, open.ai, that produced ChatGPT. Now, DALL-E's been around a year longer, and when I first got access to it, what happened would be people that would put together pictures and give you a picture, like I remember saying, show me a networking meeting, and it was a good picture and nice faces. And then there were people with 9 fingers, or a finger that grew halfway across the conference table or whatever. I couldn't use them. They're getting better. These fingers still have a little bit of a problem, but at least there are 5 of them, and they mostly look like we'd expect a normal hand to look. And then it says, and would you like to see other ways we can do it? We'll give you some other images. And I wanted to show you this because I wanted to show you how they took her picture on the left, and the big one on the top left is the one that I had made a screenshot of, and how they've changed facial characteristics, the ethnicity, the question of ethnicity and what she might be, and also how and in what way they are positioned and looked at the camera. I actually did my headshot as well, and that was scary, too scary to present to you all. It wasn't pretty, let's just say. Then we get to the ChatGPT that we're all able to use now. And in both cases, I gave you the prompts so you could see what I did, because there is no URL for you to go back and replicate this. The next time you could use this prompt, maybe you would get this, maybe you wouldn't, I don't know. But this is the actual text that ChatGPT gave me. I highlighted in bold the 5 products. I wanted to know, okay, what do workers do where they're working in AI that produces a product? I would argue that the first one, the chatbot, is not a product. It is what the worker uses to enable them to do better customer service. The others, I can see them all as products: data analysis reports, marketing campaigns, line optimization for manufacturing, and content generation and editing. And then I went and looked at a source that I know is there because I've been watching it on LinkedIn. I've been watching the number of LinkedIn lives where they all have AI in the title. It's like a moth to flames, or whatever is the analogy for attracting people. Everybody wants to know. And I had to stop myself last week from signing up for yet another one, because I thought I probably know as much or more about not how I can use it, but what's it going to mean for all the people I work with, which is all of you and Ron and me, as we try to anticipate needs for mentoring and the coursework we do. So this was not at all modified, except you can see at the top I did LinkedIn. I thought I did LinkedIn.com plus LinkedIn Live, which is their live video webinars that have a replay with it, plus AI. And you can see that there's a lot of LinkedIn Live events. You can see the videos show ones that have already been hosted, which is great. And when I then went and put in just in the past week, because you can filter Google search by time under the tools, the small tools menu, this list is postings. It's not lives. There's a couple there, as you can see from the pictures, but almost these are all people, and I was just on the first screen, who've written posts that have AI focus in there. So I wanted just to let you know, everybody's writing about it, everybody's doing it. It's like when ChatGPT came out and we were all talking about, oh, we used it or we didn't use it, or I'm not going to use it. So what does this mean for you? I know this probably seems a funny place to put this, but I wanted you to start this, what should you be doing, with what someone who's probably well-known, but certainly came out and published a list of 12 predictions. And I'm going to go through a few that I want to highlight. The first one, a role reversal will be the ones assisting the machines. I'm probably saying it's not going to be that great right now, because we're still going to have to be inputting to the machines how they work and what the algorithm is as it teaches itself to do better, be a better large language model. I think there'll still be a role for humans that's more than just assisting, but it will definitely be a factor in our work. We've already alluded to this. Certain functions that are repeatable processes, that are standardized, that have information that's handled in what I'll call a generic way, meaning irrespective of content numbers or numbers, for example, those will gain vastly in efficiency. Important, it's going to be even harder for us to sift out the substance and disregard the noise. We're already overwhelmed with how much stuff comes at us every day. And we have to accept that large language models are not just hype. And I was surprised this is a prediction because I think it's pretty well accepted already by many of us because of where we see it taking over and finding out the history of how long they've been working on this, which has been something you can listen to if you're interested. There's a few tech podcasts on it. And this one's the important one for all of you. And I'm expecting that you all are already taking care of it anyway, but it's going to disrupt traditional roles, but it also means you have opportunities for different ways of learning either the work you want to do or the way you want to go forward in your career. But you're already doing some of that because we're seeing the effects of efficiencies and in generally each year in our jobs, but also the demands to do more with less. So none of you take this lying down. You do go forward in that way. New job titles. This is in process, meaning people are putting these out here. On the left was a list. And of course, I couldn't help myself. I had to aggregate it because it was like, oh, this is just too much to present. So I look at the first group on the right as people who are doing training, people who are working more directly on the experience, who are working with users of the large language models and natural language processing for generative content for the people that are doing the work with all of us. The second group is trying to analyze the outputs of it, but to get it both for in training the model, but also in helping users figure out what the limits are, like with ChatGPT, when we found out it was making up hallucinating facts. The section that starts with number 4 is on the way in which large language models can be held to standards, so you know that you're getting consistent, repeatable actions from it. So everything from an auditor to a compliance manager. I left the ethicist by itself. That's definitely an area, just like we have in many of our job cadres. We have ethicists that work with us on the way in which we do work. And same thing on the applications developer. It probably could have gone with number 13, the one that starts with number 13, but an AI applications developer might be more generic, and then take the 13, the group starting with number 13. To me, that is how and in what way are we getting to a new level of these large language models? What's going in? How are we writing prompts to get it out? They even end with an AI input and output manager. The section towards the bottom, beginning with number 15, are a variety of ways that it's going to look and be used. Again, I may be splitting hairs between whether you put it here or in another group. I just wanted a way to talk about these 20 tasks. And then they put in tech entrepreneur, and I'm thinking, that's not a new job. There's been a lot of those already. And then this week, there was also an article, or last week, 7 jobs that don't exist now, but will in 5 years. The ones in yellow are similar to or identical to what we just talked about. They're on that other list, except for the one with the red asterisk, but that probably goes with the one on user experience or personality, meaning an avatar type of approach. But interesting, I hadn't thought about digital detox therapist, although we already have those jobs in many ways, but related to the mental health care sphere, not as part of what we're doing now with AI. And I just want to close with a post that I get every Sunday, the Summary Sunday from Career Sherpa. This is Hannah Morgan. I've used her information before. I've recommended you follow her. She's on LinkedIn. Her Sunday newsletter is really quick to scan through. She gives you these titles, and then you click through to her website and you can get to them. So this was specifically on AI. One was on job search and some articles on how LinkedIn is using it. What does that mean for you as well? So that you can really continue to focus on your evidence-based visibility and making sure you're using it to your best advantage, whether it's in job search, job promotion, changing careers, or just generally taking control of your professional development. And as I said, you have a lot of these they're all ready to go after I caption the recording tonight. So I want to stop there and ask Ron for comments, thoughts.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and it's interesting because I've been on the edge of interest in the technological advance. My original thesis work back in the 80s had to do with providing supports to individuals, informational supports to individuals, and as an alternative to training. And so I've often thought that AI was down the road, and this is what part of what its role is going to be. And interesting, some of your earlier examples had to do with the medical area. And that's one area that we had identified way back when, is that medical support to individuals who have lower skill level, but you can then have an advanced AI component that then provides support to the lower skill. And so that lower skill person then can do higher value jobs because of that. And of course, they'll learn things along the way. So for me, it's a very interesting and exciting area. It's also scary, and you didn't talk about it, the scary part. And the scary part has to do with the malicious use, of course, and we don't want to talk about that really. But that's going to be out there, and that will affect us all, malicious use of AI. But so getting back to the positive use, this whole business, like and photo processing and all sorts of things, most of us are seeing it, getting exposure. I just bought a new camera, and one of the options I have is an AI tool that I can pay. It's a monthly fee to allow me to take and improve quality images and so on and so forth. So this stuff is going to happen. It's there. It's out there already.
Yeah.
And I think, like you suggested earlier, most people, I think, when you ask them questions about AI and you say, do you think you're going to use it? Of course, they're already using it. But most people, I think, are thinking ChatGPT or things like that. And it's as a tool for gathering information that goes out there and has some kind of a survey tool to go out and data mine and eventually bring it back. A colleague of mine, and this is what I was thinking about the whole time for the last month and a bit, has been using a tool designed, he's a pastor, and he's using a tool to help him prepare a sermon series. And so it's exactly what you can imagine. It's not preparing the sermons, but what it's doing is gathering the information that when you're searching and you're hunting. And so it goes out there, finds this stuff, brings it back to the user, and then the user does what he wants with it. And and then that kind of shows how the support to someone can really enhance their ability to do work. And that's one kind of an example. Not replacing, but rather enhancing a person's capability. Anyway, thanks very much for gathering this together. It's a continuing, evolving field. A year from now, it'll be interesting what we're talking about, because we're only a year, only a year into ChatGPT. And it basically started from zero and then became something. It's like Zoom was. Zoom popped up on the scene and all of a sudden it was everywhere. It's the same with what's happening with things like ChatGPT. I see we have a hand up.
Yep. Hang on. I'm just going to unpin you and me so that we can get people on. Okay. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So they had in the Atlanta Journal and Constitution yesterday, I believe on page A2, that students are now using AI to write their essays for admissions into a university. And that it seems like the universities are all going to have to get on the same page about this in terms of screening, because apparently it helps, but it doesn't have it can't recreate the nuances that you would when you're talking about yourself from a personal perspective. So I just thought that was interesting that now they're using it for admissions. And the universities are really going to have to quickly decide how they're going to handle this.
You raise an interesting point, because it's also, as you mentioned, important in applications for graduate school, undergrad, whatever. It's important that you distinguish yourself and answer their questions, which is, why do you want to come to our university? What research do you want to focus on, et cetera, et cetera. I find that the way I know people have used ChatGPT for putting in their resume and getting improvements. I've worked with it on trying to make plainer language, writing instead of writing 12th grade, trying to get down 2 or 3 grade levels. It can't do it as well as I can do it. Just stop to think after I do the analysis in a website that I use. If I stop and think about it, I can probably do a better job. I actually have. I did an experiment for our data wizards group. But the other thing that it can't seem to do is paraphrase your specific skills without a very elaborate prompt. And I've been part of a group of people that are working with someone who's an evaluator who's done a lot of working with ChatGPT and ChatGPT-4 actually since it was offered. And she does a lot of work on analyzing her research, and she has very elaborate prompts, but they're also laddered prompts. Like she says, start here and write from the point of view of blah, blah, blah. Take this now and don't give me the results until you format it into a table in the next after I give you the data. It's that whole prompt engineer job that is very elaborate. And what I hear from people that occasionally mention it on webinars or see people in comments, not the presenters so much, is people use it kind of like a search bar where they write enough in a search bar to get a search, but they're not specific enough. So I think, Stephanie, the way in which you're describing the personal statement or whatever the college requires is part of that work that we have to educate people to use it from young ages forward is the same skill that we're trying to get them to use about misinformation and information generally. Critical thinking. What are you seeing? What are you reading? What is ChatGPT giving you? Does this sound like you? Same thing with people using resume writers who tell me, oh, I paid someone to do my resume, but it didn't sound like me. And it's not going to because you didn't write it. Let me stop there. I don't know, Peter, I know you had your hand up before, or if you or Stephanie have any reactions or additional. Or Ron, whatever. Someone jump in.
I had other comments.
Just before Peter, well, go ahead, Peter, sorry.
I had other comments, but if there's someone that wanted to react to what Sue was saying, that's okay. And before I move on to something else.
Okay, just before you jump in there, Peter, then is just in terms of this idea, because see, to my mind, this malicious use isn't always illegal. I guess it's close to being illegal activity, this business of presenting material as though it were your own. And so somehow representing yourself. This is going to be a big deal. And that's going to be a challenge for universities and anything. This whole notion is who owns the copyright on that content? It turns out it's ChatGPT owns it just because it doesn't really exist. It's certainly not me. I'm not the writer. And isn't this part of the challenge that for example, the screenwriters are worried about, is this business of having their jobs basically taken over by these bots that will craft an initial cut, and then all you need is an editor or somebody who goes and refines it and so on and so forth. And so that's probably a good use. Nothing against screenwriters, but that's probably what's going to happen, is there's going to be that kind of use. But then you get this other stuff where people are putting something out as though it's their own work, when in fact, all they did was push a button and then say, okay, that's me. And so I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, and I will just interject that just last week, has been a legal challenge by Sarah Silverman and others about her book being used by ChatGPT. And there was a very interesting copyright lawyer on the tech podcast, one of them I listened to, who talked about the idea of copyright is not that you have an idea, it's the expression of it. So ChatGPT cannot be copyrighted. Can it take information in? Yes. Can you say write in the style of Stephen King, and it might write more closely than if you, a writer, mimicked it yourself? And they were talking about how lots of people write in the style of James Patterson, who, I don't know how many books a year he does, 20 or 30 now with other authors. So there's those legal issues are still not clear because it's what's being taken in. Is it taking in Sarah Silverman's whole book? And did they obtain that illegally, meaning they borrowed it from the library, which means one user, one time, not digested? Or are they digesting a summary of a review? And they made a lot of analogies to how we already do that and what people do or don't own. So more to come on that, but you're right. Those are critical points, because it can't be plagiarism if you put your own stuff in there and ask it to rewrite it for you. It can be if you say, get out Bill Gates's resume when he was making $1 million a year and put mine in the same style. That's still not plagiarizing. But if you say, take Bill Gates' resume and substitute my name for every place it says Mr. Gates, that is plagiarizing. All right, Peter, you've got the floor now.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm really excited about using ChatGPT and that kind of generative AI. But one thing I was thinking about as you were going through is that, so if universities and professors are using it to try and find out if a student used it possibly against plagiarism or whatnot, but does that mean that HR is going to start using it for that? And they might look at my resume and cover letter and plug it in and say, did AI write it or did he write it? And are they going to start using that as either an exclusion factor and say this guy can't write, or are they going to use it maybe for some jobs, maybe as an inclusion factor of, oh, he knows how to use it, and so we want somebody that can use it. Do you have any sense of that, of whether they would start using that as an exclusion factor?
Yeah, I don't think they would, partly because people already use resume writers. All you have to do is look at the ones on LinkedIn. I admire them. They've got great ideas. It mirrors a lot of what Ron and I ask you to do, but we know if you don't write it, you don't own it. You can't say, Sue, write my resume for me. You have to give me something to work with and I can help you improve it. So I don't think they're going to worry about that level. They're going to worry about where they're exposed. Background checks, degree qualifications, levels of experience, salary that you say you were paid. That's why they call up your org. Your org is allowed to say what salary you made, at least in the US, but they can't say, you're not supposed to be able to give a reference on the phone to say, oh, that's Sue Griffey. She was a terrible employee. They can't do that. So I don't think that's going to be where they're going to put their focus. With HR, it will more likely be trying to get a better way for HR to do initial screening, even better than the categories and variables in the list that comes out of the ATS with a score. They want to get a better way to get at culture. Is this person a good cultural fit? Can they adapt to teamwork with people all over the world across time zones, or whatever those hard questions are that even when we get people in the room in an interview in the old days, you still couldn't assess it until people came on board and you put them in the situation. You can give them all the hypotheticals. So does that answer your question, Peter? I don't think they're going to worry about who actually wrote your resume.
Yeah, that answers the question. And I would just say that I put my resume and cover letter in ChatGPT after having worked with you extensively. I felt it made it worse. So somebody that doesn't have that guidance or help might need that. We working together already made it much better. So
yeah,
it's not at that level yet, at least.
No, it's not. Go ahead, Ron.
One thing I was thinking as Peter was talking is that one thing that HR could do much better, or many HR, is their job descriptions.
Oh, yes.
How many times have you and I looked at something and said, my goodness, it's a bad job description. It's just this salad of stuff. And so to my mind, if someone could develop a reasonable model for what a job description might look like, so that you get the proper weighting of tasks and so on, and proper functionality statements and so on and so forth, to my mind, that would be an amazing improvement over what HR does often when they have these awful job descriptions. And so to my mind, go for it. Improve your ability to write job descriptions, and that would be wonderful. And AI could probably do that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. No, that's a great point, because, yeah, we'd love it if everybody would, if there were only a job posting template that looked like a job resume template, because everybody's agreed on what should be in the resume, this in this order, reverse crime, blah, 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 blah. I would love it. Yeah, I know. Any other comments? Thanks, Peter, for the thumbs up. All right, then I'm going to give you last chance. Anything, whether on this topic or anything else that anybody wants to ask or talk about. All right, I have already forgotten what we're talking about on September 11th on the first topic, but I will send out the message again. You all got it earlier this week, or last week, sorry. And I will ask Ron, please, to close our meeting for today.
Silence. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's shouting at me too. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. We had a good crowd and a very lively conversation. And a surprise, we went 50 minutes today, which is quite unusual.
It is.
Often we're finished up by 30, 35 minutes. So this clearly was a good topic for everyone. So thanks very much, Sue, for doing it. Thanks everyone for attending, and see you in I guess it's a couple weeks.
3 weeks. Yeah.
Yep. Weeks, yeah.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for coming.